Hello, Pat. Are we doing this?
Hi there, Greg. I guess we do.
Let's roll the intro. Welcome to the first episode of Passion of the Geeks, a show where yours truly, Greg, and
Pat, hello there.
talk about the things we like, we love, and try to tell you a little bit about why we love those things. So this is going to be a podcast about geek culture, pop culture, and just, generally things in media we enjoy. Does that sound about right to you, Pat?
That's completely true. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, let's start with some news. So, Pat, did you find anything interesting out today or recently?
Oh, yeah. Interesting indeed. Did you know that there's a thing called the Snyder Cut, where they want the cut as the original director, Snyder, imagined Justice League? You know, without all of these corrections that Joss Whedon did.
So, you're sure we want to talk about the Snyder Cut in our first episode and basically anger half the internet?
That's a good question. No, I don't think that it's a bad idea. I just think it's, well, I honestly don't know what they're trying to do with it.
My problem, well, it's not actually a problem. I fail to be excited about this.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when I was excited about Zack Snyder and the DC Universe, and you were there. That was 2012 at Comic-Con.
Oh yeah, I remember.
We were sitting in all Hall H watching the Man of Steel teaser, and we were blown away because it looked awesome. Obviously, I think the Hans Zimmer music and the visuals, they really sold the movie. And then in cinemas, sorry, Man of Steel was just a huge disappointment. It wasn't a Superman movie.
No, not really. I remember how disappointed I was sitting there and thought, hey, this is nothing like we saw on Comic-Con. It's a completely different movie. There were a couple of scenes, but, well, they didn't work, in my opinion.
It was just a really bleak version of Superman, and that's not what I want. And they even made things worse with Batman vs. Superman, which in my opinion is one of the worst superhero movies ever conceived.
And it's a shame because I think it had a lot of potential. I thought it was a great Batman in general. But
that flag was perfectly fine.
Yeah. But it just didn't work out. I get where they were going, but either they didn't go the whole way or they didn't go far enough. But it just didn't work. It was half-hearted. Yeah.
There wasn't enough of a difference between a bleak Batman that actually works and a bleak Superman that doesn't.
Yeah.
So, to come back to the issue of the Snyder Cut, maybe I'll watch it. We could probably do a podcast episode about it, maybe live commentary or something. But I'm just not excited about it. Why not do more Wonder Woman movies or movies like Shazam that I actually enjoyed, and not something that? How much better can the movie be? They have the same footage. How much better can it actually be? And even if it's twice as good as the Justice League we got, it's still not a good movie.
It probably never will be. It's just, I think the idea that Joss Whedon rewrote a couple of dialogues and they redid a couple of scenes, I suspect, but it's just my suspicion, I suspect that it made the movie better. Well, I fear it. All of the fun, the little fun the movie had, will be lost in a Snyder Cut.
There are people who don't like their superhero movies to be fun.
Ah, okay.
Now that you said, I mean, there's probably going to be some people say, "Oh, Marvel fanboy, not every superhero movie needs to be fun."
I agree.
Okay, if that's your jam, that's fine. It's perfectly fine.
And especially with a Batman movie, it doesn't need to be fun. There is an excellent Batman movie called Mask of the Phantasm that is wonderful. It doesn't have a lot of humor, but it just works. And with all the melancholy in there, it's awesome. But I don't think a pseudo body movie like the Justice League movie we've got will go in that direction and will work in that direction.
Speaking of Mask of the Phantasm, I think at some point we probably have to talk about all the different Batman movies. And I would completely agree with you that that's definitely very, very, very high up in the list.
Indeed it is.
I think there is an argument to be made that Mask of the Phantasm is probably one of the most, is the best Batman movie. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You could actually, I think you could make that argument.
Yeah, that could very well be. But enough about the Snyder Cut. What did you find out?
I might be actually late to the party, but apparently this week, or kind of the week we're recording this, Sony is finally unveiling kind of some of the games for the PS5.
Ah, okay.
So and it's not really news or today I found out, but it just got me thinking that we're finally kind of coming to the end of this console generation. So it kind of for me it was it's not just a question of being excited about what's the new thing that is coming. It was also kind of interesting for me to look back and see how much this console generation actually achieved. So I have a PS4. I'm probably gonna get a PS5. I have a Switch and everything. But revisiting some of the old games and kind of revisiting some of games that actually came out for PS3 and then were remastered for PS4, and kind of with those games that are supposed to come out this year or kind of actually later this month for the PS4, it kind of occurred to me that this, what is it, the sixth or the seventh console generation?
Yeah, it's the sixth, I think.
Yeah, I think PS5 and the new Xbox should be the seventh one. So actually, how far that console has actually furthered the art of video games. Mm-hmm. I would like to use this piece of news as a little segue into our next segment, kind of where we talk about things we enjoyed over the last couple of days or weeks or whatever. So the check this out segment, so to speak. During quarantine, I was basically revisiting old PS4 games, or some even older, and I replayed the Naughty Dog games, like the complete Uncharted series. I prepared for Last of Us 2 coming out later this month by replaying Last of Us Part 1. And recently I started replaying the Batman games. So we're kind of staying on topic there. And it just occurred to me how good a game... Well, I'm recently playing... I just played Batman Arkham Asylum. And I think it's technically a PS3 game that was remastered for PS4. And
yeah, I think so.
Kind of just comparing that game with, let's say, Uncharted 4 or kind of the recent play demos of Last of Us 2, it shows two things. First of all, how far this generation has actually come. Mm-hmm. And that it was still really, really good in the beginning. I mean... Batman Arkham Asylum, I'm not sure. I think it's probably the best game in the series.
Okay.
Even though the kind of, and that's my only gripe I have with that game at the moment, is kind of the controls are a little bit clunky.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Sometimes we want to climb over something, but Batman jumps instead because it's the same button. And I think actually that's where the improvement over these couple of years actually happened. Not so much graphics and stuff. I mean, obviously they improved, but I think it was gameplay. But the story is there. And playing through that game, I'm a Marvel fanboy. But Batman's Rogues Gallery is just so good. Kind of,
yeah, that's true.
All his foes, they just have interesting characters.
Yeah, and they all fit very well in the narrative of the Arkham games. It's really well done. They're really well implemented in there. It doesn't feel like every villain that's features in the Arkham game is just there because they needed to have it. Oh, I need to have, the Calendar Man or some others. No, they are included in a manner that they make sense in the narrative.
They are in prison.
Yeah, well, everyone basically is in Arkham Asylum sooner or later until they get out again. And but it's also the whole Arkham design, the way they have designed Batman, the way he walks, he jumps. It's all very, very, very well done. And of course, they have the best voice actors, the best Batman voice actors.
To some extent, it's Batman the Animated Series, the video game.
Exactly, and that's a good thing. It's wonderfully done, yeah. And also how the characters change during the game, how Batman gets more hurt, how his armor gets damaged and everything during the course of the game. You can really feel how it takes its toll on him, and that's awesome.
I think my cape is about, well, it's let's just say it needs some fixing. Yeah.
And so, but the thing is,
enough about Batman. I think we have to do a full Batman episode at some point.
We do.
I think that's the thing that became clear during this little discussion. But what have you been up to? What have you checked out over the last couple of days?
I rewatched an old TV series called Robin of Sherwood. Now, this is a little obscure, I guess. It's an old British production from 1984. Robin of Sherwood is, well, of course, the Robin Hood mythos. However, it's done a little bit differently. It's not like the Errol Flynn Robin Hood or the Kevin Costner Robin Hood. There's a lot of mysticism going on. It combines the Robin Hood legend with myths and legends that fit in the appropriate time. It's also a little bit darker and I would say a little bit grittier than a normal Robin Hood, even though it's not, like Game of Thrones gritty. It's still a production that is meant for youths to enjoy. So it's not, there's no sex and violence. In fact, all the violence there is a little bit awkwardly filmed by today's standards. There are a lot of very strange jump cuts so that they didn't need to hurt each other. But the story is great. It's really well told. It's really well acted. And in fact, I guess I have a little bit of a crush of Maid Marian. So, by the way, the Robin Hood is played by Michael Praed. I don't know if he is an actor that is actually famous or something. I heard that he kind of stopped playing Robin after 2 seasons because he wanted to work on Broadway. And then for the 3rd season, they got a new Robin Hood. A completely different character, different hair color, everything was different. And he was no longer Robin of Locksley. His name was Robert. And it's actually a nice thing because in some of the original legends, Robert is a pseudonym that Robin Hood sometimes used. So it kind of fits. So even though they lost their main character, they still continued. And it's a great show. Have you ever seen it?
I have to admit, I read the title in the show notes, and consciously, I've never heard of this one. Obviously, I know Robin Hood and stuff, but I couldn't tell you anything specific about Robin of Sherwood. I might have seen something as a kid or whatever. Maybe it was on. Was it on TV? Here?
Yeah, I was on TV a couple of times. But nowadays it's just on DVD, and I think Amazon Prime has it, but okay. I'm not sure right now.
It just completely flew over me, I think. So I'm actually interested in different versions of public domain heroes. which I actually think would be an interesting episode, kind of talking about different variations of Robin Hood, kind of similarities, differences, and why some of them work and others don't. But yeah, I think Robin of Sherwood, I can't really say anything about it. The title sounds kind of okay. I'm probably gonna check a couple of episodes out. But yeah, I mean, it seems like you're a fan. Does it hold up?
Well, not everything, of course. It's very slowly cut, and as I said, action scenes kind of look awkward now and then. But from a storytelling point of view, I think yes, I had a lot of fun rewatching it. And it's just 3 seasons, and the first 2 seasons are just British half seasons, so it's not that much.
Yeah, so it's not that huge a time commitment.
You should watch the pilot.
Which brings us to today's main topic, because this is technically the pilot episode of Passion of the Geeks. Well, not technically, it is the pilot episode, first episode ever. So we thought we could talk a little bit about pilot episodes, and kind of I titled it Pilot Episodes, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. What are really good pilots out there? What are really bad pilots out there? Are there some weird pilots, or kind of what are some lessons that we for our show could learn from, very, very different pilots? So, Pat, do you want to get us started? What kind of interesting pilots can you think of?
Well, the truth is, when I think of pilots, and especially when I think of good pilots, there is one certain show that immediately comes to my mind, and that's Lost. You can say about the show whatever you want. I think it collapsed in itself in the later third of the run. But the pilot is so good. It's expertly shot. It has such a great character, has such great characters. It introduces them so well. I just wanted to know what happens to these characters, and most importantly, how they get away from that island.
I completely agree with you. The Lost pilot, probably one of the best pilots ever. But the show itself became a victim of its success.
Probably.
The pilot is so good, so expectations were really, really high. And I mean, it's a show about people trying to escape from an island. How difficult can that be in the end? I mean, do we really need 6 or 7 seasons or whatever? Doesn't make any sense. And because just that scene of the airplane on that beach, and I think they actually put parts of an airplane on that beach in Hawaii or whatever. So it's just an image that's immediately iconic.
Yeah.
That airplane on the beach, very, very similar to the Planet of the Apes Statue of Liberty on the beach. And it's just, it kind of immediately, okay, that's an image that sticks with you. And I would actually say that's something really important for a pilot as well, to give the people something that they immediately associate with that show. That beach, that chaos, everything that was going on. And I think the show was never really able to deliver on that.
Yes, it was very clear that it will be a show that is told with a lot of flashbacks, because that was set up in the pilot. But when they started to have flash forwards and they drifted more and more into a supernatural era, where I think is not fair to what the pilot did. The pilot set up an excellent story about people wanting to get away from an island and the past they had. And then it suddenly becomes this very convoluted plot about strange things that kind of never get untangled until the end. So, I have to confess, I really lost interest in the show.
You lost interest in Lost.
Yeah, I lost interest in Lost. I was lost.
I mean, I would actually agree. I mean, the series finale was a letdown. And I think it was, I mean, there were actually, for long stretches, the show was actually really, really good. But I think it's kind of, you can see they had a really good idea for a pilot. They had a really good premise. But they were making it up as they went along after that.
Yeah, it feels like that.
You mentioned that the Lost Pilot introduces characters very well. Are you familiar with The West Wing?
A little bit. I watched a couple of episodes. I never really got into the flow with the show, but I'm familiar with West Wing.
I actually think that, speaking of character introductions, The West Wing pilot is probably one of the best ones out there. There are so many characters in the West Wing universe, and the pilot just introduces all of them so flawlessly. By the end of the first episode, you actually know who everyone is and what kind of their thing is. And just because of, not just because of the way they talk, because it's Aaron Sorkin, they all talk really fast and quite a lot. But the way they're introduced, their insecurities, the goals they have in life and in their job, it's just so well done. And my favorite thing, the whole episode, obviously it's a show about the American presidency. So the whole episode, kind of in the background, the president as a person, as a character looms. And he doesn't show up until the last scene of the pilot. And I think by that moment, you've heard so much about him, and kind of not everything flattering. And then he comes in, and you immediately fall in love with him as a character. And it's just, okay, this is the president. Where and when can I vote for him? So it's just a really great introduction of characters. And I mean, you don't really have to introduce the word because it's our word, but that's actually something that why I actually enjoy watching pilot episodes, because they not only have to introduce us to the characters, they have to introduce us into the world and the rules of that word as well. Maybe that's something that was a problem with the Lost Pilot in the long run as well, because those supernatural rules, I mean, it's not really something you get, or you get too much of in the pilot. You get a little bit, but it's you don't get all the rules basically.
You do get a little bit of a vibe that there's something supernatural going on. And I mean, I'm not against supernatural things in my TV shows. I usually embrace them, but somehow it as you said, it just didn't feel like they were thought out prior to filming. They were just making up as they go.
Yeah.
Which is something I think a pilot should do. It should show the audience what kind of show it is, what they have to expect, the theme and the tone of the show.
Do you remember the Buffy the Vampire Slayer pilot?
The real or the unaired?
Here's the thing. There's an unaired pilot, and I think I'm going to put a link into the show notes. But the kind of from a story or kind of from a premise point of view, the unaired pilot and the real pilot are actually not that different. The Willow character is played by another actress. I think that's the biggest difference. Obviously, the unaired pilot is just 20 minutes or so long. It's more like a proof of concept. But what I really like about the pilot and the unaired pilot is the first scene of the show. You see this little blonde girl and this big buff guy, and they break into the school. And kind of the lighting and the music and the mood is, okay, this is not going to end well. This is not going to go well for her. At least that's what you think is, okay, he's going to do something to her. And I mean, at this point, you know, okay, this show is called The Vampire Slayer. He's probably a vampire, blah, 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 blah. And then he tries to soothe her and says, yeah, everything is going to be okay. There is no one here, so on. And then she says, you're sure there's no one here? Yeah. And then she turns around and she is the vampire.
Yes.
And that's kind of, I think at that point, in those 2 or 3 minutes or whatever it is, you know everything you need to know about that show. It's gonna play with your expectations. And it's a show about, it's called Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where the girl with the silly name gives the crap out of vampires. And in this first episode, in the beginning, it's actually the helpless blonde girl that is the vampire.
Yeah.
So it's kind of straight from the get-go, you know the rules. And this is not like any other vampire story where we have Dracula or whatever who, is the strong guy and the little damsel in
The weak
distress.
girl. Yes.
Yeah, the damsel in distress, yeah.
The
That's why I really enjoyed that. Even the unaired version of the pilot, obviously, it's not that polished, but I think the premise and the vibe is there. And
yes.
I think watching that pilot, even that unaired pilot, it makes sense why the network picked it up.
I think so.
Yeah.
The pilot, I think, hadn't found its tone yet. It feels a little more like a high school thingy than the later episodes. That's just my opinion a little bit. Not that it hurts, but I think that they weren't sure where they were going at that point.
I think they were sure where they were going because Buffy, for me, is a show about growing up.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
With each season, they get away a little bit more from that whole high school vibe, which is kind of Buffy is growing up.
Yeah.
Season 5, for example. I mean, that's I would say that's where Buffy grows up. And I think at that point, it's definitely not a high school show anymore.
Yeah.
What's your opinion about backdoor pilots?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. A backdoor pilot, as far as I understand the definition, they're made to gauge if the audience has any interest in something. And I can see why a studio would want this to happen, why they want the backdoor pilot and see if there is actually someone who is willing to watch the show. I'm not sure if they always work. Case in point, have you seen Knight Rider, the 2008 version?
Yeah, a couple of episodes. Well, there are not that many, but yeah, I'm familiar.
Well, I think if I understand correctly, that was a backdoor pilot they did for the new Knight Rider. And I think it's really decent pilot. I love Knight Rider. The original show, I'm a child of the 80s. Kit was my dream car, and he shaped me. I think that's the reason why I do not want a car. I want a computer with wheels. And so I didn't like Knight Rider 2000, the movie. I absolutely hated that. And I wasn't a fan of Team Knight Rider. It didn't work, in my opinion. And then they said they make a new Knight Rider. In 2008, there was the pilot with a new kit, with new characters, with new drivers. And the pilot, in my opinion, it works. It works very well. It had everything I wanted personally from a new Knight Rider show. There were a couple of things that they were obviously testing out, but it's okay. I was really looking forward to the proper series. And then it came, and well, I guess that they used feedback from that backdoor pilot to make the series, and they utterly destroyed it. It just became a sort of jumbled mess. It was no longer about one man making a difference with his awesome car. It was suddenly, again, a team of specialists assisting the new Michael Knight. They even changed his name to Michael Knight because they thought, oh no, Mike Tracer is not a good name for the character for Knight Rider. It lost its own identity that the pilot had, and it just was sort of a rehash of the original Knight Rider and just cranked up to 11. Kit was no longer a car, it was a transformer. and it just didn't work. I still watch the show, and at one point they found themselves, and it got really good, but at that point it was already too late. The show was cancelled, and that's all we got about the new Knight Rider. And I think this wouldn't have happened if it wouldn't have been a backdoor pilot. If they could just go on.
I mean, just for clarification, I consider that Knight Rider, I consider that a TV movie and not a backdoor pilot.
Okay.
I mean, for me, a backdoor pilot is like when they have, it's like an episode of the CV show Arrow, and then they had this, I think it was actually a 2-episode backdoor Flash pilot.
Yes.
Where just a new character shows up and they try to figure out whether or not people are interested in that. And then he gets his new show. And then when the new show starts, you start with the first episode, technically another pilot. And everyone is familiar with the character and everything already. So, and I just, most of these backdoor pilots, they actually don't work. Because I like a show about these characters set in that world doesn't necessarily mean I'm interested in a different character who just casually is part of that world somewhere else, because you want to separate them a little bit, because otherwise you could just put them in the same show. And I mean, that being said, I actually think that the CV DC universe is actually one of the few cases where those backdoor pilots actually worked. And those shows, they work very well together. I mean, the Crisis crossover was actually really, really good. And they kind of started that in that backdoor pilot, or in those backdoor pilots. I think that couple other ones later. But I think in most cases, it just doesn't work. Yeah. Just give me my new series and then let it cross over if you really need to. But I think it's again the same problem that Lost had. I think at some point it just gets too much.
Yeah, I agree.
In a way, to some extent, I think the Arrowverse, I think as they call it, got away with it because it has been on the air for so long. But they changed premises and they introduced new concepts. I mean, at the beginning, it was just a guy who trained on an island. And then he had some science introduced to it, magic and sci-fi, time travel and everything. They just have everything now. And it kind of works. It's okay. But I think at some point they're just going to kind of run into a little bit of trouble.
I think it works because a lot of people watching Arrow and all the others from the Arrowverse, they're fans. They were already fans, and they knew, in this universe, there is this guy and this guy and this guy. And I wonder how they fit into the Arrowverse. Because, as you said, at the beginning, it was just a guy trained on an island, and there wasn't a lot of supernatural stuff going on. It was gradually introduced into the show, and I think that's one of the reasons it worked, because it came in small pieces, in small steps. But you're absolutely right. I mean, just look at The Flash. It's The Flash has a completely different tone than Arrow, in my opinion.
Which is okay, perfectly fine.
Which is okay. No, this is great. I'm just astonished that it works so well, because The Flash started on Arrow. They often meet and go into each other's episodes, and it still works. So they did well.
Just to get back to the whole Knight Rider thing, because the show has one other problem, and maybe you completely disagree with that. Here's the thing. I'm not sure that Knight Rider is a show that has a place today. Because to me, it feels like something from the 80s that worked in the 80s, and that, well, obviously worked quite well there, because I liked it as well. I even liked David Hasselhoff's music. Don't know how that happened, but okay. So it had its place in the 80s. I don't think that these 80s TV shows necessarily translate too well to today. They did a couple of others, and yeah, it's just they have the character names, they adapt theme music, and then they just go with it. And why? Is it just because of the theme music? As far as I think they're redoing Walker, Texas Ranger, actually.
No, really?
Yeah. And it's just baffling to me. Why would anyone today
Why?
be interested in Walker, Texas Ranger?
Oh dear God! So we have gotten this far. They're redoing Walker Texas Ranger. Okay.
I think if I'm correctly, they're redoing it with the one of the guys from Supernatural.
Okay.
I know that I'm risking being punched through the microphone right now by Chuck Norris, but Chuck Norris was not that good. There was this time, there was this period in the 80s, or maybe even earlier, when he was kind of popular, but he's just a joke now. He's just a joke.
I'm afraid he became a meme. And once you've made it into a meme, you're gone.
Yeah.
No, I agree wholeheartedly.
I mean, maybe that was the problem with Knight Rider as well, that sometimes it's just really hard to resurrect an old idea.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. It obviously didn't work. But I think the way they have tried to get it work in the pilot, or well, in the TV movie, you're probably right there too, because it feels more like a TV movie than a real pilot. But they try to make the car, sort of realistic. It does repair itself. It has a couple of nanotech bonding and so on. They try to make it realistic. They try to, it doesn't have back seats because there is all the computer stuff in there, and they completely got rid of that, and they made it into a science fiction vehicle, a transformer that just uses Ford automobiles because of reasons. And in my opinion, but maybe there's the nostalgia speaking, I think if they would have continued with how they did it in their pilot, I think it would have worked. Maybe not several seasons. It was probably destined to die.
Yeah, it's really hard to resurrect something from a long time ago. There are only a couple of examples where it actually works, resurrecting something.
Maybe that would be a good subject for another podcast. Because it's really interesting about remakes, reboots, reimaginations, and so on.
You have another pilot on your list that kind of fits that category.
Yeah, I wanted to talk very briefly about the Doctor Who pilot, the 2005 Doctor Who with Eccleston as the Ninth Doctor. And, I was already a Doctor Who fan when the new Doctor Who came. I have watched the Seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, as a youth, or almost as a child. And I watched the mediocre movie with Paul McGann, I think.
Yeah.
And then there came the new Doctor Who. And the first episode was called Rose. And it didn't do a bad job. It introduced the Doctor, it introduced the new companion, Rose. It was a story about mannequins
Coming alive, yeah.
becoming alive and attacking people. And it had a lot of questionable humor in there. I think Eccleston did a great job. He was a great Doctor. I really liked him, even if it's just one season. But I think, couldn't they have chosen a better story to reintroduce the world to Doctor Who?
I would definitely consider that episode kind of a pilot, but I think every episode of, or almost every episode of Doctor Who can technically be a little bit piloty because of the whole premise. And I mean, the thing is, because of Rose, the companion, being the audience surrogate, I mean, it's just easy for the script to just let the Doctor be the Doctor and everything that she needs to know, that we as an audience need to know. It just gets explained to her. Yeah, trust me, I'm the doctor. Come with me if you want to live or whatever. So
basically, run.
I mean, and I would actually say that part of the pilot of that episode works actually quite well because it's built into the whole idea of Doctor Who, that you have the audience surrogate, and it just makes sense. I would actually say that every episode with a new Doctor is kind of a little bit like a pilot. But that's kind of at the beginning of the second season of the revival, we had this Christmas Invasion, this two-parter, which was actually quite interesting because the focus was definitely on Rose and not on David Tennant as the new Doctor, because I think for most of the episode he's actually asleep or in a coma or something.
Yes,
it's kind of let's let her carry the show a little bit, and then in a way she, obviously not knowing what regeneration is, and kind of he having to come to terms with the new body and everything, that I think that worked actually quite well. But I think to this day, of all the new Doctor Who seasons, I think it's the first season with Matt Smith as the Doctor. I think it's when Stephen Moffat officially took over as showrunner.
Yeah,
that episode is called The 11th Hour. When I want to introduce people to Doctor Who, I show them that episode, because it starts with a new Doctor, it starts with a new companion, and it's a better episode than Rose was.
Yes, so I agree.
I would actually say that even in the middle of, I think it's season 4 or 5 or something, even in the middle of a show, in this case like Doctor Who, you can have an episode that actually feels like a pilot.
Yeah, I completely agree, Greg. I usually, when I want to introduce someone to Doctor Who, I do start with the Matt Smith Doctor Who.
My favorite Doctor is probably still David Tennant.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I would have a hard time to... You never forget your first Doctor, and that was the 7th. But I would probably agree David Tennant had just the right energy to be the Doctor, and the right heart, I think. Yeah. But one thing that might be true as well is that probably in Britain, Doctor Who was never really gone in a way. Everyone there knows about Doctor Who. Maybe they didn't have to explain everything, and the stuff they do explain in Rose is enough. It's just not a good story, or not the best story.
I think sometimes it's okay to let the audience use their brains a little bit.
Yeah.
You don't have to serve them everything on a platter. Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. I think this was a pretty decent discussion about pilot episodes. Anything you want to add to this discussion, or anything very, very important we missed?
No, actually, I think we've covered the basics of what a pilot is about, what we think a pilot should do. I wonder, did our pilot do this?
Well, I think that's not our job to judge. This brings us to the end of the first episode, the pilot episode of Passion of the Geeks. Please look out for our next episode. Like, subscribe, whatever there is to do. And that's it for this week.
And then see you next time, Greg.
Yeah, see you next time, Pat. Take care.
Bye. You too.